Work it, make it, do it, make sense.
Okay, guys, let's start this session. First of all, thank you so much for joining us to this cluster your microprofile applications in CDI and JCache session, so kind of like a long name. Really sorry for the small delay. As you probably can see here on our table, we have like a huge setup to demo some of our stuff. Yes, those guys are actually Raspberry Pis, and we'll show some of those things that we want to demo with them in a bit. So first, if you allow us to introduce ourselves, I'm Roberto Cortez. I work for a company called Tommy Tribe. I don't know if you ever heard about that before, but we mostly work with Apache projects, namely the application server Tommy. Other than that, I run my own blog on radcortez.com, run around conferences doing all kinds of sessions. So this is like a new session that we're doing here for the first time, so hopefully it will go well. And yeah, I mean, if you have any questions that you want to ask me, I mostly work with Java EE stuff and Java in general, so please drop me a line on my blog or on the email. I'll be happy to answer any of your questions. And here I have my other colleague, that's John. Can you introduce yourself?
I sure can. So my name's Jonathan Gallimore. I also work for Tommy Tribe alongside Roberto, based here in the UK. I've been a committer to the Apache Tommy project for around about 10 years now. So I started committing in about 2007, contributing various patches. And I followed that community right through to starting to join the MicroProfile effort, which we'll talk a little bit about today as well.
Okay, so let's dive into our session. So usually most of the people save their questions to the end. We're actually not that many in the room, but even if we have a full room, I would like people to, every time you have a question, just ask it, because it's mostly easy to answer the question in the context when we are explaining something. So please just raise your hand and say, hey, let me ask you this. So please ask your questions anytime you have them, just don't save them to the end. Of course, if you have questions in the end, just you can make them anyway. But please, let's try to make this more interactive as possible, and feel free to ask any question anytime you want. Our agenda for today is we're going to look a little bit on what is a microprofile, look also a little bit what's in JCache. Then we're going to do a demo with some of the Raspberry Pis that we have over here. And then we're going to look in some of the stuff that's predicted that we're going to have in the future for the microprofile. But before going to microprofile, I would like to ask some questions to the audience. So does anyone here knows about microprofile? Have you ever heard about microprofile before? One, two people? OK. And now you guys doing microservices? Yes? So all the room is doing microservices. OK, you're just not using microprofile to do it. You're just doing like this, like Spring Boot, Lagoon, any other framework? No? OK. So what I'd like you guys to learn about is that microprofile is a joint effort with several companies that try to give you a microservice architecture that you can use on a Java EE environment, but not with the heavy weight of the Java EE. So let's look into some numbers and some things. So if you want to see some of the stuff that MicroProfile has already done, you could go to microprofile.io. We already have the release that's 1.0, and it's compromised with CDI, JAX-RS, and JSON-P. So why only those three specs? Is because that's the least amount of specs that you require to actually build a microservice. So most of the times when you build a microservice, it's only a JAX-RS endpoint with some injection on it, and then you returning JSON. So basically, you have these three specs only. That's the minimum bare metal that you need to run the microservice. And of course, if you actually need to run some stuff into XML, JAX-B is actually part of the plain Java SE, so you don't need Java E for that. Another interesting thing is that MicroProfile is giving you application portability across several environments. I'm going to see some of the servers that support MicroProfile. So, who's here is using Java E regularly? A few people, okay. Do you guys enjoy using Java E? Yes, no? Well, for the MicroProfile world, probably Java E is kind of like a cannon to kill a fly. We have, if you look into how the Java E spec evolve and how many specs there is per version, you'll see that it's been gradually growing every major release. So for E5 we have 24 specifications, then we grow up to 30, then 37, and E8 it didn't come out yet. There's already a couple of specs into that. But it's probably going to have more than 40 specs into that version. So that doesn't seem right when you're trying to build a microservice or trying to build something that you call micro, right? Have 40 specs when you're actually probably not going to use 90% of them. So if you go to any of these vendors, so we as Tommy Tribe and committers of Apache Tommy, we are now supporting MicroProfile. There's also support from WebSphere Liberty, Wildfly Swarm, Payara Micro, and Cumuluzu E. So all of these servers implement the MicroProfile specification, so you can use it. You can use them to run your microservices. And if you actually go to the website, we have a sample application over there with like several modules. It's actually very interesting because it's an application around conferences that basically allow you to like register attendees and register sessions and stuff like that. And each part of the application is actually implemented in a different server. So I don't remember exactly which one's mapped with who, but let's just say the agenda is built with Tommy, the attendee registration is built with WebSphere, and then all of the application is just built together and run on all servers simultaneously, only a bit on each of the server, so you can actually see the MicroProfile working with all these specs on these different environments, and it actually works. So it actually proves that there is portability between all the vendors and all these application servers. Now, let's dip a little bit into some of the specs. So it's just a quick reminder on what we have over here. So CDI, who uses CDI? A few people. So CDI is the context dependency injection spec from Java E. It only came out on Java E6, even though we were able to inject some stuff before, mostly using AJBs. But it's probably one of the most important specs in the Java E world. So pretty much allows you to define the life cycle of a bean, define injections that are type safe. You have producers that are able to produce beans of a specific type. You can add interceptors on top of that. You also have observers and events. So it's a very powerful spec that allows you to integrate with a lot of technologies. Most interesting is mostly all the other specs are now leveraging the CDI into their own implementations to leverage the power of the CDI. So if you look into transactions, now you're able to see transactions using CDI events and other stuff. So JAX-RS, who here used JAX-RS or at least heard about that before? Most of you guys. Yeah, JAX-RS is the answer of Java E to implement RESTful web services. It's probably one of the most popular specs out there, especially when you guys are trying to implement microservices. It's mostly annotation based, so you're able to set up an endpoint very easily, just annotating a POJO with a path and a post or a get to indicate the method that you want to perform. Then you can just return a response over that. The JSON, XML, doesn't matter. And it's mostly HTTP-centric, so it's very easy to set up paths, set up query parameters, set up forms parameters, and just using annotations on the methods parameters. So it's probably the spec that's I'm not exact. I don't have any numbers to say this, but I will guess it's probably the spec that's mostly used. Well, it's more used in the Java environment at this time. Then finally we have JSON-P. JSON-P only came out on Java 7. It's by the way, is anyone using JSON-P? One person, yeah. So it's used to parse, generate, transform, and query JSON. It has a streaming API. It's an object metamodel API. So it's still a low-level API in the sense that you're not able to, in a standard way, have a POJO and map that POJO to a JSON object. You usually have to have a JSON object and then add the fields over there if you're using the object model API. Streaming API is very interesting because it allows you to parse huge amounts of JSON, especially if you have JSON files to 40, 50, 60 meg, or even higher. Basically, just streams the file. You can parse it, and then you can perform operations on whatever you extract from the JSON file. So if you just try to load that file directly into memory, most likely the server or the JVM will blow up out of memory. Just a small example. So if you put all these specs together, we will just build a very small microservice here. I'm using here a simple REST endpoint, which has an application scope bean with a path just called path. So when I call my endpoint, will be localhost / context of the application / path. I'm injecting a movie beans over here. Doesn't matter what it is. It's just like a store where I keep data. And then this endpoint will just do a get by path on the ID of the movie that I have over here. I'm injecting the ID on the movie on the method parameter, and then I can just do a find over there. And then I can build a JSON object with the object builder API. In the end, I'll just return a response.ok with that object in it. So it's just roughly 15 lines of code, very, very small and very condensed. So this is probably what the microservice should look like in the MicroProfile spec. Now, moving next, so we have JCache. John, do you like to take over?
Yeah, sure thing. Thanks, Roberto. So I do apologize. I'm hoping that the demo is going to work okay. We seem to have a few gremlins with it at the moment, but I'll talk a bit about JCache and walk through the coding, and then hopefully we can show you that with the metrics running on the Raspberry Pi stack. So is anybody here using JCache at all at the moment, or is it fairly new to everybody? So JCache is it's JSR 107. It went final early in 2014, so it's been available for a couple of years now. It was quite a long-running specification, as you can probably tell by the low number. It took quite a long time to get to that final release. But actually using JCache inside your application is fairly straightforward. So there are 4 key concepts that you need to know about, which are on the board there. So the caching provider, in effect, this allows you to select between any number of different caching providers that are available in your server or your application. So you can actually deploy a number of different implementations of JCache into your server, and if you wish to, you can use the default one that call to caching.getProvider will give you, or alternatively, you can specify the name of the caching provider that you want to pick up. Each caching provider will provide a thing called a cache manager, and this is something that will look after a number of different named caches. So you can say, I'm interested in pulling information from a particular named cache inside your application. A cache itself consists of a number of entries, and these are key value pairs. So if you're used to using hash maps, for example, inside Java util, using a cache with key value pairs is very similar. There's obviously other stuff that goes on around that in terms of how things get evicted, but in terms of how you interact with it, it's quite similar. So you can pick up JCache and just use it in a standard Java SE way, using the code that I've got up on the screen here. So this is going to go and get the default caching provider that's available on the class path, and this is loaded using the services loading mechanism. The next block of code then goes and gets the cache manager from the provider, and then we're using a cache called default, which just takes an object as a key and also has object as the value part of the key value pair set. And then finally, adding a value to the cache at the bottom there. So we're using world as a key and hello world as the value that's actually being put into the cache there. As you can probably imagine, you could actually take the Java SE approach to using JCache, and you could start using that inside a Java EE or a MicroProfile application right away. That's going to leave you with probably quite a lot of boilerplate code floating around inside your application if you're going and writing this sort of code every time you want to go and cache a particular value. So I will show you what we can do using the JCache API, Hazelcast, and also a JCache CDI extension, which will allow us to make use of some JCache annotations that are defined by the JCache specification. We're using Hazelcast here. One of the nice things about Hazelcast, does anybody use Hazelcast, by the way? Quick show of hands. Oh, a few of you. One of the really nice things about Hazelcast is out of the box, it will distribute the cache across a cluster of machines, and they can join either by configuring the TCP addresses in a configuration file, or you can use multicast if that's available on your network. So the different servers can discover each other, and the cache will be distributed across those servers. This will work right away in MicroProfile, just using the CDI extension. So it's just a matter of adding the JCache API jar to your server if it's not already there, and then adding the Hazelcast jar and the CDI extension into your application to get started. I will just make a quick mention of Tommy. So I don't know if any of you are too familiar with Apache Tommy. So as Roberto mentioned in one of the earlier slides, there are a number of different vendors working together on the MicroProfile project, including IBM and Red Hat, Payara, and Tommy Tribe. And so each vendor is producing an implementation of the MicroProfile inside their own server. So our implementation is Tommy, specifically Tommy 7, which is the latest version. A little bit of history on Tommy, just very quickly. We first announced Tommy in 2011 with Java, and we were Java EE6 certified. But it's actually grown out of the Apache OpenEJB community, which is an embedded EJB server. We looked at Tomcat and sort of took a slightly different approach to the other app server vendors who were typically taking Tomcat and embedding that inside their own application server to provide the servlet and JSP functionality for applications. We actually did the opposite and kept Tomcat as the core component of our server, and actually put OpenEJB, OpenWebBeans, OpenJPA, and all the various other components inside Tomcat, and did the integration between all those components and zipped it back up. So what we actually end up with is a server that is very true to its Tomcat origins. So if you actually open it up, you can see it has the same conf lib web apps directory as a regular Tomcat server. I take it a few people use Tomcat in the room. Okay, awesome. Okay. So very quickly, I don't know if you're having any luck, Roberto, but our Raspberry Pi setup here, you'll notice that we've got a couple of different clusters. But basically, what we're doing here is we have 2 data centers. So the colorful stack on one side and on the other side of this stack here represent two different data centers. We have a HA proxy setup that is load balancing traffic across these 2 data centers. And then we have a load balancer, which is the Raspberry Pi in red at the top of each stack. We have 2 Tommy servers running on the orange Raspberry Pis, and we have a MySQL database running on the purple Raspberry Pis at the bottom. The stack that's in the middle here is a set of clients. So these are making calls through to JAX-RS services. So they're effectively generating some load and sending traffic to all the various different Raspberry Pis for us. We do have that. These should be pushing out statistics through into Elasticsearch, and we have some Kibana dashboards, which if we're able to show you those, then we'll do so, and talk a little bit about the metrics proposal that's in MicroProfile, so that you're aware of what's coming down the line in terms of functionality that's coming in MicroProfile in that regard. So I'm going to steal my laptop if that's okay.
Sure.
And I'll swap over with you. Okay. I'll keep hold of the power. Thank you very much. Yeah, just unplug that. Okay. Okay. Awesome. Okay. Roberto, do you want to just see if that's working on your set? Perfect. Okay, cool. Can everybody see my screen okay, or do I need to blow up the resolution a little bit? I can certainly increase the font, I think. There we go, that's a little bit bigger. Okay. Okay. So here I've got a rather simple JAX-RS based application. So this is our movie fun application that we've had in OpenEJB for a while, and we've converted it over to work as a REST service, and we have a persistence layer that is basically a CDI bean that we're injecting into our REST layer. So in our movies REST, let me just expand that. So you can see we have a few different endpoints here. So we have a service up here where we're able to search through a number of different movies in the application. We have a request here which will go and search by one particular field in our table, the genres field, and return the various different distinct values back from the genres. And then we've got some CRUD methods to add, edit, and delete movies from our application as well. And finally, one right at the very end that will produce a count for us. And then using fairly standard CDI injection, we're injecting the movies bean in here. So this is effectively each one of these services is delegating through to this bean to do the persistence side of things for us. Inside the movies bean, it's probably as you would expect. So we have an entity manager that's being injected in up at the top here, and then the various different methods here are doing JPA2 operations against that entity manager. So pretty much everything that's coming in here is going to go straight through to our database to do some sort of interaction, whether that's to pick movies out of the database or add something new in or make a change. So what I'm going to do is basically show you how you can add JCache into this application. So the very first thing is we need to add the 3 dependencies that I mentioned earlier. So we need to add the dependency for the JCache API, the Hazelcast jar, and also for the JCache CDI extension that I mentioned. So I've taken a little bit of a head start rather than trying to remember all of the Maven coordinates off the top of my head. I've added these 3 dependencies in here. Okay, so we've got the Cache API, Hazelcast. The latest version of Hazelcast is 3.8.1, I believe. I think this will work with earlier versions going back to about 3.3 or 3.4 was when JCache went final and Hazelcast had its implementation complete. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is write a very quick CDI producer that's going to provide that can basically inject caches straight into this class. So the idea is to avoid the sort of boilerplate that we have on this slide. So I'm going to try and basically inject the caches straight into this code to avoid having to write this code everywhere. So I'm just going to create a new package, which I'll call cache, and a new class, which I'll just call cache producer. Okay. I'm going to give this a retention policy. No, sorry, I'm going to do that on the annotation. So on here, I'm going to inject in the cache manager. Oh, let me just zoom that in for you. So this injection here is something that the JCache CDI extension provides for us, so we don't need to actually add any code to support this particular injection. And then I'm going to just add my producer method. So it's going to return me an object cache. Okay. And I'll add the producer's annotation on there as well. So at this point, what I want to do is go into Cache Manager and basically ask it to either give me a cache that's already been defined, or to create one. But each cache has a name in the Cache Manager, so I'd like to specify a way in my injection to actually provide that name. So I'm going to just create an annotation under here as well. Which I'll call movie cache. Okay, so I'll just give that a name. It's going to have a retention and make that inherited as well. Okay. So once I've got my annotation very quickly set up, I'm just going to flip back to my producer and I'll add my movie cache annotation on there as well. And then I'm going to, in my cache manager, I'm going to do I'm going to take my injection point and look for my movie cache annotation. Okay. Then I'm going to look at the name of the cache. Excuse me. Oops. So if my cache has already been created, I'm just going to return it. Oops. Feel free to shout out my coding errors, by the way. Okay. Otherwise, I'm going to go and create my cache. So I'm going to provide a name and I'm going to provide a configuration as well. Okay. So I'm going to use mutable configuration. So I'm going to set the types. So this provides the type of the key and the type of the value that the cache is using. So I'm going to set both of those to object.class. Turn statistics off. Okay. Can't quite remember what the setting for that is, so I'll come back to that afterwards. Okay, so there's my very basic CDI producer that's going to inject that can now inject my cache into my movie bean. So what I should be able to do over here at this point is actually start injecting private cache. So I can create, so if I wanted to, say for example, I wanted to produce a cache to basically keep in memory the results that are returned from this getMovies method here, I might create a cache that's just called movies. And I can provide my movie cache annotation here as well. And I can just call that search. So if I now want to, I could actually come into the movies method here, and I could start doing something here. So I could say, movies.get and provide the key, see if there's already an entry inside my cache that I want to return, or alternatively put something in there. One of the really great things that is in the JCache specification, though, is there's an annotation called cache result. What this allows you to do is actually basically use all of the parameters in this method. So the first result, max results, field, and search term. It will concatenate all those together to all the values of those parameters together to create a key. And then it will automatically intercept this method, look to see whether there's already an entry in the cache with that particular key. And if there is, just return it and not actually execute through this method block at all. And if there's no entry, then it will execute the method and then add the result into the cache for you. So in effect, with the CDI extension enabled, you can actually just start wrapping methods. If you don't need to do any additional logic around the cache, you can actually just go and start adding this annotation to your methods. So this is great, but obviously there's a bit of an issue where we might be keeping some stale results behind. So, for example, if we've done a search with a particular genre, for example, if we then go and add a new movie that's a comedy or a horror film, for example, the results from this search that have been cached may now no longer apply because there's now something additional inside the database. So this is probably an area where we would want to actually use the cache here. Oh, I'm sorry, I've called that search and I've called it movies there. So we may actually want to go and actually clear down this cache, or we might want to go and pull entries out of it that are stale. So in this case, just to keep it simple, I'm just going to say movies.clear. And again, I can do the same in the add method and the edit method, so I can go and programmatically manipulate the cache if I want to. One of the other annotations that's available is the cache put. So, for example, when something is added, when we call this add method here, we might want to go and update a particular cache. So again, this takes the cache name, so I will call this movie by ID. And I can use the movie that's passed in here as the cache key if I wanted to, although probably more likely I'd quite like to use the actual ID of the movie that's passed in, so that I can reference it again later when I'm calling this delete method, which just takes the ID and not the full movie object. So there's an attribute on the cache put annotation here, which is called cache key generator. So if I very quickly create one of these, oops, we can basically make this take the movies object, but actually generate a different key for us to use for the cache put annotation. How's it looking?
Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. So let me just expand that again. Can everybody see okay? Okay. So this implements cache key generator, and it takes a parameter that provides the invocation context of the method for you. And what you can do here is you can actually go and pick up all of the various parameters that the method was called with, and then you can manipulate them to create a cache key at the end. So, for example, you can. So we can get all parameters. I'm just going to close that up. We can say if parameter.get raw type dot equals our movie class that we're interested in. Whoops. We can just cast the value of that parameter. Okay, so new object. Okay, and then obviously if I end up through the loop and I haven't got anything, I'm just going to throw an exception here. Okay, so what that will do is it will basically wherever we're using movie as a parameter and we want to use that as a cache key, it will actually go and strip out the ID for us to use as the key for the entry instead. So then if I wanted to, obviously in the delete movie, I might want to go and grab, so if I inject in movies by ID here, I can say movies by ID, and I can go and find the element that I want to remove. Or alternatively, there is a cache remove element that we can use as well. And again, cache name would be movies by ID. Okay. So I'm running a little bit short of time, so I hope that gives you a bit of a feel for how relatively straightforward it is to add JCache in terms of the libraries into your application and actually add some of the annotations that are available into your app. I'm just wondering, should we swap back over and we can talk through some of the metrics that we provide and talk about some of the MicroProfile things? Okay. So we have a, just in case things went wrong, we did have two sets of Raspberry Pis. There's the power. So, is that quite long enough?
Yeah,
okay,
will do.
You can just hover on the end.
Yeah, so as you can probably seen, I spend a lot of time over there during John's talking, and this setup is sometimes a little bit unforgiving. You know, it's so many things that can go wrong. But anyway, I was able to make it work, and we have it sometimes. Well, I think it works pretty much okay most of the times. Like in the morning, we had it running after 2 minutes for some reason. Now, of course,
for some reason, as soon as we wanted to show it in a room full of people,
you know why?
To not work.
Because we forgot to sacrifice someone to the demo gods.
Yes.
And well, I haven't sacrificed. I won't do that anyways. But I should have sacrificed something, but I haven't done it. But hopefully, and still, I have one of servers that's not.
I was going to say, I can see that you got one that's not producing.
Yeah. Anyway, one of the reasons I think that sometimes we have a little bit of hiccups, especially when we unplug and plug back in again, is because we're running, actually, all of those pipes are running Docker. So we use like Docker images on all of them that runs a client that injects data into servers, and was basically the client and the servers are running plain Tommy WAR files that just invoke an endpoint on a WAR file that has an endpoint exposed. As John said, also we have an HA proxy on those clusters that are colored ones, and then the other one is another HA proxy that balance between both of them. So I don't know if this is, well, I'm not sure what's the best one. Probably this one over here.
Have we got a JCache version deployed here?
Yeah, this is a JCache version.
Okay.
So basically what we have over here as well, our Tommy server also has like, some jar files that we added over there that will introspect stuff that's happening on the server, and then we will push data into an ELK instance, so Elasticsearch, Logstash, and Kibana. And then we came up with these metrics that will showcase things that are happening on the server. So if you'll see here on the left side, we have the endpoints that are being called by the clients that are the black ones to the other clusters. And it's very interesting that actually, I didn't make it on purpose, but actually it's fun that happened that way. So each cluster is one is called Grom, another one is called Trowel. And usually it should be two servers on each of them, as you can see here. So Trowel is actually working at like 40% capacity because one of the servers not responding. So usually if all of them were here, it will be like 50-50. And here per server, we have server 1, Trowel server 1, Grom server 1, Grom server 2. So I can actually see that Trowel server 2 is missing for some reason. So this also provides very cool monitoring features. So you can actually see if you're doing something like this, you can see, oh, one of the servers is down. So what's happening? And now we also have, our idea will be to, okay, so this is actually very interesting as well.
So talking about the database side of stuff is probably...
Exactly, that's what we're going to show. So as you can probably see here, we have this graph that basically shows the database queries and the database statements, the timing. So when I was able to have this working was around 2:28, and basically the server started, loaded some stuff that was on the data store, and of course it has to done some queries. Where after that, Hazelcast kick in, and now I don't have any queries that are being executed on the server, especially because the clients are only doing GET requests, so that's not going to change anything that's on our data system.
So each of those 9,372 requests effectively is pulling data straight from the cache.
This coming from the cache
through to the database.
And also an interesting thing over here is that you'll see that the first few requests, of course, this might be because of the JVM warming up, but this will be caused by the database calls. That's the ones that are going to take the most. So the first few ones that are over here, that's when the system starts up. They are much higher than the ones that we have at the moment. Why? Because, of course, I removed the database, and now I have my JCache in the middle that's just serving the data that my clients are requesting. So you'll see here for the response time for each HTTP request. So we have a 0.3 seconds on each request. And here you'll also see that the TPS, okay. So the transactions per second also went up from here to here when the Hazelcast database kick in. Of course, when you have a database, the system will be more overloaded, will have to spend more time doing stuff, so it won't be able to handle that many requests. Now with the JCache on top of it, now I was able to scale my cluster over there to handle more requests. So those are kind of a few things that you can do with these metrics.
Do you want to bring up one of the metrics on the not in the dashboard here, but in the Discover tab? If you bring up like the CPU one. So if you flip to Discover, and then
now let's see.
So one of the things I just wanted to mention here, that in MicroProfile there is a proposal that's being discussed on the mailing list, and there's a pull request for it in the GitHub repository, which is around providing metrics. So what we've shown here is what we have currently that we at Tommy Tribe have been doing inside Tommy. As you can see, that's very much a sort of a push base. So as events happen inside the server, we push those through to Elasticsearch. But there's in the proposal in MicroProfile that specifies a number of different endpoints that you can use to obtain metric data. So you can do a /metrics /base to get particular metrics that relate to something that's in the app server, or /application to get application-specific metrics that you can provide by having a bean injected through CDI. So I can see I'm out of time, but if that's something that you're interested in, have a look on the MicroProfile list and maybe contribute to the conversation that's going on there. We'd certainly be interested to know what sort of things you're doing in that regard.
Yeah, so we have a couple of other things to show you, especially those health check stuff on what's going on in the future, and other stuff on the specs of the MicroProfile. But we run out of time. Anyway, we would like to thank you guys for showing up here on our session. We were missing the link here, but basically, actually, this setup is on a GitHub repo. So it has all the Docker images, all the Ansible scripts, all the client, all the server stuff. So if you want, you can actually replicate that environment
on your own set of Raspberry Pis.
Set of Raspberry Pis, or you can just run all the Docker containers in your laptop. So I'll just tweet the link with the GitHub repo.
And we'll publish all the slides.
Yeah, publish all the slides. So just go Rob Cortez, and I'll publish those in a sec. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much
for showing up.